Yeah. Well, okay, so let's jump right into that. Give us more color on the origin story of Meira.
So I was actually on the board of Cadmon, and they needed someone at that particular time to go in and do a number of things in the company. So I agreed to do that, and for a year or so, and without really knowing what I was doing, I went there and ran commercial and learned a little bit, but I wasn't there for 2 years maybe. So got some familiarity with how you sell drugs. It was very, very complicated. And I have a lot of respect for people who do that in the US in particular. But they had an idea to control genes with small molecules, right? And they are not a gene therapy company. So at that particular time, we decided to take that idea, which hadn't yet been made, out of Cadmon and build a gene therapy company. And so I became one of the founders and CEO. Rich joined, and with a number of other founders, we brought together, we acquired other companies, a few other programs, and we set up a company initially in the UK because our first deal was with the Moorfields and UCL to buy eye products. And we immediately looked at the world of manufacturing because no one could manufacture it. How can we have a pipeline? And we started building manufacturing. We immediately, having acquired a company from UCL, which was extremely strong in vector development, we set up organoids. We focused on promoters and capsids and sequence, and from there built this notion of really looking at every aspect of these drugs that allow you to use lower, safer doses and deliver them locally in a way that you avoid a lot of the very obvious risks of doing somewhat difficult things with genetic medicines, like big gene replacement by systemic delivery. Fantastic work, got Zolgensma approved, right? I mean, incredible life-saving drug, but definitely a very difficult thing to do, a very expensive thing to do, as we've seen recently, as we've seen over the years, big, massive systemic doses. So we thought, okay, so what we're going to do is make genetic medicine, DNA, a drug that can be used like small molecules, like biologics, like RNA as this new modality where those other modalities are not effective enough or not broadly usable enough, right? So not as it's intuitively thought of to just replace broken genes. That's what gene therapy has somewhat come to mean.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to build a company that investors would invest in, that was able to have a pipeline of products that we really thought worked, that we were willing to spend money on working. And so we focused on local delivery of gene replacement in the eye, of changing neural circuits in the brain by tiny doses locally delivered, of changing cell function in the salivary gland for xerostomia. And so far, 9 years later, we've brought those products forward, and we have 4 late-stage products, one pivotal, one phase 3, one about to read out phase 3 in the eye with Johnson & Johnson, and one for a very rare disease where we just did a compassionate use. We gave the drug away to young children, ages 1 to 2. Every child born blind, treated with our drug, can now see.
Mm.
So, which is, miraculous, right? So across the board, we took a strategy that slightly avoided some of the obvious risks that other people took on board, but we didn't, because our aim was to broaden the use of gene therapy. And while we were doing all that, and we built the best manufacturing in the world, we're a commercial manufacturer, we have lead optimization. Well, before that, we quietly, like you would if you're at MIT, quietly invented a completely new way of controlling genes with small molecules of your choice that is so many logs higher dynamic range and usable as a drug and as a platform than we ever imagined. We're currently in a position where we can deliver anything encoded by DNA that makes RNA, whether it's GLP-1, leptin, amylin, PYY, any combination of those, every pharma's antibody, nucleases, CARs on CAR T, we can precisely control how much of whatever that drug is produced at any time by giving the animal a pill, and we're taking that into the clinic. Mm-hmm. So we were able to do that because we put all these other things in place: manufacturing to support our pipeline, optimization to support the pipeline, but all of it, which you need if you're going to use DNA to treat large diseases like obesity. You need to be able to use mini doses, like 3-4 logs less than you use for a local delivery at another time, So there was an unknown end point, which we have achieved more than we anticipated. But we put in place many, many layers of things which are individually valuable, but together each support each other's value.
Yeah. In retrospect, I mean, I can see where that de-risks the entire initiative. But that's in retrospect. And I mean, it's well stated, right? Like if you've got a broad, the overused many shots on goal, cliche or metaphor, if you will. But leading into this, like from the outset, and realizing that risk is subjective, the assessment of risk is subjective. Leading into this, it occurs to me that perhaps some people would go, oh, a startup company, a new company wants to embrace development and manufacturing in its entirety on its own. And it wants to build a pipeline of, I mean, what's Meira now? 14 like stated program-ish?
Yeah, we've got 4 late-stage programs. We've got, multiple pre-IND, which we need to finance, but yes. So we focus on our late stage. Yeah.
Right. Yep. But my point remains, like to some people, they'd look at that and they go, well, boy, I don't know. As an investor, I'm not sure that I want to jump on board with that, because that sounds kind of risky. They want to build manufacturing capacity. They want to own the entire thing. Some people tell me, a giant step in our biotech, or a giant decision in our biotech's development was to de-risk by outsourcing, or de-risk by being uber focused on a specific molecule or a specific indication. So tell me about that. What's your headspace around that? Actually, what looks like to some a risk being risk mitigation in the mind of Dr. Zandy Forbes?
You're going to build a company that in 10 years' time has transformed DNA into a modality that can be used to treat obesity, right? Fantasy, okay? But you need today to have a pipeline that will be successful. Mm-hmm. So you start with, okay, let's look at everything out there that we have to buy, in-license, or build. How, in your original clinical programs, are you going to avoid risk? The number one decision that we took was not to focus on an indication, right, that required large doses that eventually came to be seen as potentially unsafe, right? And rather to only look at where we thought there was going to be a less risky clinical path forward. That involved local delivery of small doses in somewhat immune protected areas where there was human proof of concept. Every one of our programs had those things. Yeah. So looking back, by avoiding the risks associated with large systemic deliveries and not going after super high priced drugs for really rare pediatric conditions, by not focusing on that, we actually put together a diverse pipeline based not on indication, but based on chance of success.
Yeah.
And we also looked at the market, right? Because when you're doing gene replacement, it tends to be small markets that you charge a lot for. We looked at our xerostomia market. It's a massive market. It doesn't go away. It's people with head and neck cancer. Parkinson's, a massive market. We also looked at cost of goods because small locally delivered doses are not only safer and may work well in the clinic, guess what? They cost so much less. So our Parkinson's drug, which is in phase 3, just had really good data. It's 1E12 titer, 35 microliters delivered. It's the lowest dose, smallest dose, safe, true. How much does it cost? In the hundreds to thousands of dollars per patient, not hundreds of thousands. So there was a lot that went into choosing these indications where at the very outset, we avoided some of the risks that other people are, heroically taking on and addressing. And the manufacturing thing, one of the people who founded the company with us, Stuart Naylor, had been at Oxford Biomedica and had learnt how essential it was at that time to have manufacturing in-house. And that decision is one of the reasons we have a pivotal program and a phase 3 program today. Because we built manufacturing, we got our facility licensed. We then did a deal with Johnson & Johnson. We had the Johnson & Johnson, the J&J VC group come and do diligence. And they actually told us at that meeting, had they set the company up, they would not have allowed us to spend the money on manufacturing. However, J&J wouldn't do the deal with us unless we had. So,
yeah.
Right. And then we built a plasmid facility under our GMP quality systems, not because, we want to manufacture plasmids, which we clearly don't, but because it saves about a year in time and a ton of money. Then we had to build our own QC facility in order to release material because the big vendors were taking up to 18 months to release something that should be 6 weeks. So you can't have a commercial supply chain with that kind of bottleneck. So little Meira went out, built a QC facility, designed and validated every single assay for commercial QC, for stability and release. We have a commercial license, right? We didn't want to do that, but we couldn't be a company with the quality of vendors in the world today.
Yeah.
And we save now end-to-end manufacturing. We're very well known by the FDA. We cross-reference everything. FDA knows us super well from a manufacturer perspective. And it probably saves 3 years in the development timeline of any drug. It is hugely valuable as a potential business. We have partners and other companies wanting us to manufacture. So there's value to our own business, but at this moment in time, because it's unique, in how we built it with a pipeline, with a platform based on more than 20 viral vectors, right? That's it becomes valuable as a supplier ourselves.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the intent. We didn't know any of that. We would have loved to use CDMOs, but it turns out to be multiple years faster, at least half the price, probably way more than half the price. And aside from that, a valuable asset. We bought the land as well. We didn't just lease it. So we own stuff because I'm a bit of a
Yeah.
freak. I like solid things, not just like spending money.
Yeah. Did those aspects make it easier or more difficult to fund the company? Like as you grew and needed more money. I mean, it sounds like a more of a nuanced and it sounds like there's some complexity, I guess, to the pitch. But you're very convincing, Dr. Forbes. So did that desire to own the entire system, to own the very ground that the processes live on, uh, did it make it more difficult, or did it sort of enhance your fundraising periods?
I think that a broad view of a business as a real business looking to the future is difficult for certain types of public market investors to think about. We have some really, really smart, long investors with long views who are really supportive. And we never had a high valuation. So while gene therapy companies would be going to multiple billions based on a program,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't do that. We've actually raised significantly less money than many, many, many of our peers. A, because our market cap never went to those levels, probably 3, 4, 5 times our market cap,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we didn't therefore have that market cap opportunity to raise massive amounts of not money less dilutively. But we've certainly have really supportive investors, and investors are of all different types, right? I mean, there are investors who just say, well, what's your next catalyst? And I only want to know about one program. But they're probably not the people who would be interested in a fundamental investment in the sort of company that we run. There are others which have very different views, which like certain programs over others, which support whole businesses. So in general, has it been more difficult than it might have been had I been in a different company?
Yeah, created a virtual company with super low overhead and people, just a
Yeah,
handful of people distributed across the world, outsourcing everything that you do.
maybe, but it would have been different investors, and we have had investors that were very happy to support the company we've built. That all said, right, the last 3 years for genetic medicines and small biotech in general has been the most difficult ever in the history of the industry. So, in the context of that environment, I don't know if a single product company would have done it. I mean, I think we've done an incredible job navigating the last 3 years. And we do have supportive investors, and we have got non dilutive financing. And frankly, in a world where capital is difficult to get, we have been in a position this year in particular to look at our business as multiple businesses and start talking to companies and investors about taking positions in different programs, taking positions in different entities, each of which is arguably as or more valuable than our current public market cap. So there's a big change over the last 3 years as to what investors are thinking, the types of investors that are interested in companies like ours, the source of capital, not necessarily from traditional short-term, long-short, not even from big mutual funds, but these other sources of capital that are looking for innovation, looking for diamonds in the rough of this sort of wasteland, post-World War One wasteland that's NASDAQ, right?
Yeah.
There's an evolution of investors that we we think with and alongside, as well as pharma companies in any environment. And this is undoubtedly, as I'm sure everyone that you speak to, this is a weird and difficult market, right? Even the last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
volatility is enormous, the liquidity is minimal, the selling is maximal, the buying is through private offerings or ATMs. It's a very unusual, well, it's become usual, but from my experience a decade ago, it's
Right.
not how things were. And one has to adapt and speak to a lot of people, including pharma companies, right, about
Yeah.
the different aspects of value and what they want and how to monetize things that you wouldn't have if you were just a single trial company.